Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with K. My name is McKay, and in today's video, we're going to focus primarily on the coin or the crypto known as CHAINLINK. It's kind of one of the OG coins. It's been around a while. Its more common or simple name is just Link. And there's going to be a handful or probably quite a few YouTubers that should be covering this coin or already have been covering it maybe for the past week or so, and probably for the next week or so, as it has some pretty major news coming up, which is something we'll cover in today's video. But I wanted to give you guys my own kind of spin on the chart, the entry ideas that I'm looking at and the targets as well. And if that sounds interesting to you, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. All right, and then just briefly before we hop over to the actual Link chart, we're here on the 1 hour Bitcoin. This is the CME futures chart, so the ticker is the BTC1 explanation point. And I just wanted to kind of give a quick update on what I've been tracking as far as this goes, and it will also tie into Link as far as entry ideas. Let me explain. So here on the 1 hour chart, so a little bit lower time frame than I normally talk about on the channel, you had this kind of large, it was actually a bear pennant, but it's a symmetrical triangle because it came into it from higher prices. This is considered a bear pennant. Comes in with a steep drop, then you kind of just get a series of lower highs and higher lows, and price condenses, and eventually you get a break one way or the other, at around 70 to 75% full, or the closer you get to the apex, which is the end of the triangle, you expect a breakout. Well, I would say probably about 90 to 95% full is where we got the move. Now, statistically speaking, this was a bearish pattern. It had a higher probability of breaking to the downside, and in my Telegram group, which as always, I'll leave a link in the description, I had posted this chart and was talking to the members about this idea that, hey, there's this potential rising wedge here, also kind of a somewhat of a crooked head and shoulders if you wanted to look at it that way, which is basically what a rising wedge has inside of all of it, or all of them. If that were to break to the downside, which was also the lower side of this larger triangle, you had a measured move back down here at 15K. That was one of the trade ideas we were looking for. The other was a break and a retest of the triangle, which is what happened here. It broke out of the triangle, retested, and started trending this way. At that point, we were tracking this kind of rising channel that was the, on the other side, more or less, of this symmetrical triangle, right? You broke out of that, then you had this rising channel here. So we were kind of watching, okay, if we break above that, that's pretty bullish because this particular pattern has a higher probability of breaking to the downside. If it goes against the probabilities, that can often lead to major upside. So anyway, these are just kind of my thought process. We broke above that, retested. I think if we double click here, we can see down here, hard to see on my screen, I got this indicator in the wrong spot at the moment, but anyway, you can see there was a spike in volume to confirm that breakout. Something else very important to always keep your eye on is there volume on a move. You're less likely to be caught in a fake out if there's volume to confirm the move one way or the other. In this case, a break to the upside, a retest, and now we're pushing higher. So as far as entries for Link, once we get to that chart, I usually use Bitcoin. I shouldn't say usually, I always use Bitcoin as the driver, because at the end of the day, even if this coin has news or a coin has news, it's still going to have a better potential of upside if Bitcoin is at least stable, and especially if Bitcoin's trending higher, then the likelihood of that coin playing out in the direction that you're looking for, it just goes up. So anyway, so really what I'm looking for at this point is just a break of this next upper level of resistance. You can kind of see I have this green box, and what it is it's just the confluence between the measured move of this rising channel we just discussed, which was up here at around 17,350, and the measured move of this falling wedge that broke to the upside and retested here, which was up here at about 17,250, right? So there was some confluence between both those measured moves, just $100 difference, right? And that's basically where price action more or less is now. In fact, it spiked as high here on CME as 17,200, so very, very close to both of those measured moves. What we're looking for now for the next kind of upside move is a break and flip of about 17,300. If we get that, then we'd expect Bitcoin to hit the larger measured move of this triangle, which is clear back up here between like 18,200 and 18,350. Now this right here, should it happen, the break and flip of the 17,300-ish, then that move right there will tie into kind of the CHAINLINK short-term targets. So just keep that in mind. That would be what I'd be looking for immediate upside out of Chainlink, and of course Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin and then Chainlink to follow. And then, the option B, I suppose, would be a retest back down here at about 16,850. And as long as that level holds, that will tie into the kind of the pullback entry ideas that I'll have on Link. Now, keep in mind that the entire upside to me is invalidated if we break back into this pattern. This rising wedge, at least at that point, I'd expect if we lose 16,800 and it's back as resistance, that we're probably coming back down here to this, confluent area, which is my blue box, clear back down at 16K. And I really don't want any part of Chainlink, obviously, if that is going to happen in the short term. So that's kind of the invalidation, which Bitcoin is the driver. It will tell me if I should stay out of, trading Chainlink to the upside. So that's where I'll be setting, some alerts, is if price action does pull back in the short term here on CME, I'll be looking for it to hold 16,800. And then just real quick before we dive into the actual chart, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there is some news coming up for Chainlink. Now, if you've been a follower of my channel, you'll know that in the past I've mentioned that a big thing that I look for as it pertains to trading coins is whether or not they have upcoming news. The whole idea in trading is just to stack as many things in your favor in the direction that you're looking to trade. Obviously in this case to the upside, things like the chart, and the patterns that are developing on the chart can look bullish in this case, which we'll look at in a sec. We can look at things like news. News just is something that has attention towards the coin. Some of your retail traders that don't know anything about TA and anything about charts might just buy and hold a coin like Chainlink based on this news. Now, on COINTELEGRAPH.com, which I'll leave this link in the description, this is just their headliner. It says Chainlink eyes 25% rally ahead of the Link staking launch in December. And if you scroll down here, it just mentions that this said staking feature, which goes live as version 0.1 in beta mode on December the 6th. Now, as of recording this, it's the 30th of November, which is the last day of November, so it's only a week away. Typically, you'll see sometimes a sell-off, or at least price might retrace some, the day or two before the news. So we're not looking at necessarily a ton of short-term upside, potential. However, it doesn't mean that if there is a pullback, on December 6th or the day before, that it's not going to still rally, especially if the market's rallying, and especially because there's a lot of hype on the staking feature. So I just wanted to read you that real quick before we dive into the chart itself. So now as we hop over to the Chainlink or Link chart, the first place we're going to start is the daily chart. That sounded like a little Dr. Seuss rhyme there just then. But anyway, now those of you that follow my channel know that most of my trade ideas are based on these higher zoomed out time frames. But even if you're a scalp or a day trader, so to speak, and I do scalp trades from time to time, it's almost always going to be based on, the TA on the higher time frames first, because, again, trying to stack odds in your favor, I'm going to see what the overall general trend is on different, some of the higher time frames first, because that will give me my biases to a degree on what my lower time frame scalp trades are going to be. But that being said, as we look at Chainlink, this is going to mostly be based on higher time frame ideas as far as all of these targets go, keeping in mind that, there could be a bit of a consolidation / slight pullback, a day or two, leading into the actual news, which, as you can see here, I posted on the chart, is December 6th. Now, this is just a graphic that actually came off of COINMARKETCAL.com. I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. That's just a website that I often use to track upcoming news for crypto coins. So anyway, here on the daily chart, I just want to kind of explain first that this price action that we're looking at here dates clear back to basically the middle of May of earlier this year. So we're talking like mid or end of spring, early summer. You had this range, this very big, large range between the lower end, which has been, around 550 with some wicks a bit lower, all the way up to the upper end, which is the top of the zone at about $9 to $9.30, right? And Chainlink has just been trading inside of this large range that entire time. It's visited the top of the range on 1, 2, 3 different occasions. It's floated around the bottom of the range, far more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and most recently 6. And if you want to count the top side of that bottom of the range, then you got 7, 8, 9, all sorts of time spent down here. And then if we just kind of clear that back up, you have what we refer to in trading as kind of the mid-range. Now, granted, not all ranges are going to have a very clear mid-range. Some have two mid-ranges. For example, the CHAINLINK really kind of does. It has this area that it's just recently broke above, which is this area right around between, I would say, about $7.15 up to about $7.50. A pretty wide zone or range, right? You can see clearly it's had rejections after rejections at this point. It's acted as support at that exact point. And then I don't have it marked on the chart right now, but if you look above, you can also see this area at $8 has been resistance on many occasions. So really you have a range low, you have a range high, and typically in trading you have what's considered the mid-range. On CHAINLINK's chart, I'd actually consider that you'd have kind of like this mid-range low, if you will, and mid-range high, if you will. And when we zoom into the lower time frames to explain my entry, ideas and targets, you'll see that something like this mid-range high would be something that would be one of my first, major targets for CHAINLINK. And one quick thing we're gonna do before we actually zoom in is we're gonna zoom out even further. We're still on the daily time frame. I just, put more price action on my screen. Just wanted to kind of explain the power or potential power of some of these larger time frame patterns, just to kind of give you clues as to what trends trying to do. In this case, you have this really large falling wedge that dates back to when CHAINLINK hit its bull run high of last year in May of 2021, right? And so you had this touch up here, you had this touch here. Most recently, 1st of November, you had a third touch here. And if we zoom in a little bit, it's actually moved out of that pattern. Basically, when it broke above about $7, it started to move out of this pattern. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean all of a sudden it's just going to automatically go back up here. In fact, quite the opposite. But what it can mean is that the bottom is potentially either in or close to being in. The coin is giving you clues in a sense that it's trying to end the current trend and possibly start a new trend, or at least enter a long consolidation phase. Now, with the consolidation phase, you can kind of see, again, dating back to May of this year, it had already basically begun. As it bottomed out here within this range, you can see now, more zoomed out, it's already been consolidating for some time. And one thing that my mentor, when I first started trading, and he kind of drilled into our head that, the longer a coin has spent, consolidating or, within a tighter range, the bigger the upcoming move will be. Now, does it necessarily mean with this news that it is going to break this range and go to the upside? Not necessarily. It could just stay within this range, but the news catalyst could be, enough to get it to test the top side of this range. At some point, though, which we'll make future videos about, what we'll really be looking for is for CHAINLINK to flip that area of about 930 back into support, and especially if it can flip this area back here, which was our our spring highs in March and February. I guess that's March. February is not spring, but anyways, our early spring highs. If we can flip that area at some point, around $12, then that's when we'll definitely know we're back in somewhat of a major, macro uptrend. But in the meantime, we're just going to zoom in and look at kind of short-term, possibly mid-term trade ideas. Now we're zooming into the 4-hour chart, which is really where my entry ideas are all going to be based off of. Now, one thing that I've been tracking is you kind of look back at price action here between September of earlier this year and basically November. So you kind of had this month right here where you basically had a large cup. You got a little pullback if we use the fib tool back to around the 0.5 fib level. In fact, if we go to the actual low, which is what we should do, you can see actually that the 0.5 is what it wicked down to almost perfectly. That's a pretty common retrace area for what would be known as the handle, right? Cup, handle, and then you got the breakout. Well, what we're watching now is that, before we even talk about shorter time frame patterns and targets, you can kind of see price action now. It's at a lower price than that previous cup and handle, but it's more or less doing or done the same thing. You had this cup form right here, right? And then you got a little retrace. If we pull the fib tool again from this low to kind of the, I guess, this high up here, you had the 0.5, not perfect, but very, very close again. So just very, very similar to what happened back here. And then now we're starting to get this potential larger move like we had back here, to the upside. So really at this point, your best entries, at least for short-term trades, are kind of, come and gone already. Of course, buying the breakout of this wedge we were tracking back here, or something that I had been watching. I didn't personally trade this, so I'm not gonna, toot my own horn or anything, because I didn't even trade this, but it was something I was tracking at the time. This would have been your best entry, the break of this little wedge back here, clear down at, just under $6. Another good entry would have been the pullback of the cup, kind of following that back here. Now, I'm trading CHAINLINK as we speak, and I will post that graphic on the screen. However, I didn't get this entry either. That would have been amazing as well. The breakout of this falling wedge, which would have been this entry right down here at just over $7. The most recent entry that I was tracking was a break of that and a retest, which is right here. And even then, I didn't front run it, or I didn't get the perfect retest. You'll see that my entry is actually in the $7.40 some odd range. It's almost $7.50 actually. So I'm only barely in profit at this point. However, with all of my entries, I DCA in. That was just DCA entry level 1. What I'm looking for right now is, you can kind of see these two different channels that I'm tracking, kind of a channel within a larger channel. Let me clear it back up and kind of explain. So with something like a rising wedge, now this pattern in itself is bearish, and what I mean by bearish is it just has a higher probability of breaking to the downside. In a lot of cases, that's just obvious. If price is going up for so long, it's got a higher chance of eventually going down, right? The longer it's going down, the probabilities say it should go back up. But, in a nutshell, this is a bearish pattern. However, it's only bearish, in most cases if it's, breaking down or potentially about to break down, below bigger time frame resistance. It's more bullish if it's above that, right? And what I mean is, for example, you have this whole area, which is our mid zone we're tracking, that's been, resistance and stuff back in here and back in here recently, that it has now trying to at least flip as support, right? Which is this area back down around $7.20, so just above $7 anyway. And at this point, yes, we're in a rising channel, which is bearish, but to me, any retest of kind of the lower side of this could be actually a bullish retest, higher probability of actually bouncing on the lower trend line of the shorter term pattern, because zooming out, it's a larger area. In this case, as long as we're above it, it's support. So anyway, just to kind of break it down in more simpler terms as far as just what I'm looking for. Again, when it comes to trading, you're looking for confluence, multiple ideas pointing in the same direction. And idea number 1 for entry for me on a pullback idea, which would be combined with Bitcoin, maybe retesting 17K, as low as 16,800, like we talked about kind of towards the beginning of this video, would be a retest for Link anywhere between, this area that it's just about to retest, just under $7.50 would be an area you could DCA lightly into. That's kind of this little channel within the channel that I'm tracking and with the yellow trend lines here. The more realistic area that it would, CHAINLINK would test or likely retest should Bitcoin, retest 16,800 would be kind of the lower end of this zone, which is anywhere between $7.10 on up to probably be your better entry, or your more realistic entry would be about $7.20 to 25 cents. So that's kind of your retest entry idea at that point. Clearing the chart back up, your breakout entry ideas, you'd want to see volume, of course, but you can kind of see that back here, again, we saw this when we were zoomed out, but this area around $8 has been, resistance and support on many occasions. And right now, that'd kind of be the upper end of this channel we're tracking. If it breaks and flips that as support, you get a retest entry, get a break with some volume. You'd want to look down here and see a volume spike, of course. Nice, big, healthy dildo, as a lot of traders say, a green dildo to the upside, followed by, some volume follow through on a retest. This could be a good entry idea for what we refer to in trading as, the breakout entry or the breakout retest entry. And then entry idea number 3 would just be based on Bitcoin potentially in the short term, retesting as low as 16K. Again, we talked about this at the end of our little Bitcoin portion. Now, this would be, I would stay out of CHAINLINK. This will require more patience. I wouldn't want to be part of CHAINLINK. If Bitcoin's breaking down from 16,800 and retesting as low as 16K, but that's something we have to be open-minded to. And what we could be looking for as far as Link goes, especially if this happened in the next 24 to 48 hours or something, and we still had some time to then trade the news that Link has coming up at the end of next week, right, or the middle of next week. If this broke down from this channel here, you might see a retest back here of this kind of little bit previous, this area that was previously resistance, broke, flipped this support, resistance here, sorry, broke, flipped this support here. This is that area around 650 to 660. You can see that that's been kind of a key area, just at least for the past month or so that it's been trading inside of this range. And that would be, structurally that would still be a high, a low. If this was to be a local high, then this would still be, a higher low potentially as it worked its way up. So that's something that we'll update on and keep an eye out for, but that would be something to set an alert for. And then if, ChainLink has that larger pullback, it would actually also be another retest of this. When we zoomed out, this was that kind of larger term trend line that we covered on the daily. That would just be a potential daily retest. Again, which it kind of already did back here, but it'd be a second retest of that trend line. So that would be 3 different entry options. Now let's talk targets. So there's a million different ways you can get targets, or at least a few hundred. There's a lot of ways is what I mean to say to get targets, but I'm just going to quickly go over the ways that I usually use and what I'm going to use as I trade ChainLink. And the most obvious one, which is the upper end target, this is where I would close the trade out, or at least close 90% of the trade out, would be the one that has the most confluence, which is if it can over the next, day or so continue to hold and consolidate above this mid range, which is this box that I have between around $7.10 on up to about $7.50. If it can hold that and as support, the top of the range would be kind of the bigger target, right? And that's going to be a move back up here to about 25% to about $9 to $9.30. It also has some confluence if you take the measured move of, again, we have this cup and handle. The way you take that measured move is just the bottom of the cup to the top of the cup, the neckline more or less, and then drag that over to the potential breakout area. You can see there's some confluence with that target as well. So that would be our upper end target, where we would, most likely close out 90 to 95% of the trade. Obvious targets along the way would be this $8 range that we talked about when we were zoomed out. You also have this $8.50-ish range. The reason why this is blue on my chart is that on the weekly time frame, this is kind of an area of weekly support and resistance. In this case, it's above us, so resistance. And then, of course, the lower end of this actual zone up here, which is around $9. Now, another way you can find your targets, and the way at least that I always do my targets, is you take the fib retracement tool, go from the last major swing high, which is this wick up here that happened back on November 8th at around $9.50 almost. Take it and click there, drag down to this low, which is, back on November 21st. And then just drag across, and you can see targets to the upside. You can see there's some confluence with the golden pocket, which is the 618 to 615 for that $8 range. If it breaks and flips that, you can see that the 786 is kind of around where that weekly resistance is, which is about $8.62. So $8.50 is what I would be the safer bet anyway. Just a little bit more of a round, even number that people that maybe don't trade as much might just use as profit-taking levels. And then the 886, which is going to be the underside of that zone above, which would be about $9, would be another good area to take profits. Now, keep in mind, it's always good to take profits in percentages, just like when you enter, in percentages, DCA in, DCA out. The way that I would trade this is I would take about 30% profits. I'm leverage trading it actually with 3x leverage. I will also leave a link in the description to some videos I've put out on how to leverage trade. Be careful out there, not financial advice, of course, and you can get wrecked. But if you trade responsibly with 2 or 3x leverage, that can always be a good idea as well. And, this is where I would close 30% out. I'd close another 30 to 35% out up here around 850. Let the rest ride up and close out the remaining of it minus maybe 5%, kind of your moon bag, so to speak, up here at about between 9 and 9:30. And then super quick before we sign out on today's video, one final way that you can find targets to the upside is you can actually, instead of the fib retracement tool, you can use this trend-based fib extension tool. Take a recent swing high to swing low that's been confirmed, swing low to swing high, back to low. You got this low here, click here, go to this swing high, this confirmed swing low, and drag it across, and now you have some kind of upper end targets here in the short term. You got this 1.272, which has got some confluence. You always want to find confluence, because you got to understand that there's so many different ideas in trading. You're just trying to, you don't know which way other people are trading, which ways a lot of people may trade, fibs, regular support resistance, pattern measure moves, and etc. But the more confluence you can find, that's the areas you want to target, and then from that point, maybe front run them a little bit just to try to, sell before the majority of the market sells, if that makes sense. So here you've got this confluence of the 1.272 at about $8.85, the 1618, which is a big one. Anytime you see the 618 involved in any of your trend pulls, take note of that. You can see that has some major confluence with this wick up here, which is the wick we used for the other tool, the Fib retracement tool, which is about 950. So of course, front running that would make sense at about 935. So again, you can see where you can use all of these tools and find confluence together, or it can be just as simple as looking at, resistance levels above and taking profits and percentages at those said resistance levels. And as always, I appreciate you guys stopping in. And if on your way out, if you haven't already, please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. It's